spiritual community, ACO, and Ascension Center organization that Janet and I headed up. And she and I had many, many conversations with him, and he always wanted us to use Vimeo and get producing videos. So that's our next level. But Ken and Janet, hold on. Let me get this guest person. Hello, guest person. You're live on the air. Okay, Janet, why don't you introduce your guest person to our Allied Command night?
This is Crysana Duran, and she's been on my show twice, and she's a wonderful, powerful person with great wisdom, and she's very much involved in the UFO experiencer investigation field. I believe Crysana is also a lifetime contactee, and she worked with Ida. Let's tell me her last name. Ida, I don't have it in front of me right now, but this person, Ida, that she worked with was a first-generation contactee from back in the 40s. So I'll let Crysana tell everybody about herself. Welcome to the show, Crysana, and share with us. Who are you?
Thank you.
Welcome
well,
aboard.
I'm still searching. No, I'm not still searching. Ida's name is Ida Cannonberg. And she had her first contact in 1940 when she was, I think, 26 years old. And she passed away in 2010, and she was in her 90s. And she and I work with the same contactors. They are time travelers. And Ida wrote a number of books, and after her death, her family gave me the rights to publish them. So I publish all of them. They include Time Travelers from Atlantis, Project Earth from the ET perspective. That's two of them. And then I have my own book called Web of Life and Cosmos. So I was very involved with Ida and the Time Travelers, and I also have been very involved with the origins of the Mayan calendar, and the geometry, which I call the time star, that applies to the Mayan calendar. And I made regular predictions using that calendar since 1996. And so one of my predictions was in 1998, and I got the information from the time travelers. And they told me that in 2012, the sun would go through a phase shift. So we would experience a solar phase shift, and after that we would have cooling or an ice age like environment. And of course that's what we're in right now. And the 2012 solar maximum, which is when they said it would start, was so extraordinary. You have to read the science of what actually happened in that solar maximum from the Russians and from NASA, because none of them get the whole story. But it was an extraordinary solar maximum, and we're now in the mini ice age that they told me about in '98. So that was one of my predictions, and I do that with the Mayan calendar model. It's not exactly the Mayan calendar, because they personalized it to their way of life, and I personalized it to my way of life. So that is my background, and I think the emphasis really is on contactee in contrast to abductee. I have had very minor abductions, but I've had very open contacts with the time travelers.
Right.
Well, can we, Ken?
Yes.
Janet, I'd like to get Ken and our guest. I can't say your name yet because I don't see it, and I'm. Is it Crysana?
Yes.
Yeah.
Crysana. Okay, Crysana, I'd like you and Ken, because this is very important to me. I didn't know tonight was going to be important. You never know when you think you're so sick you don't feel like doing a radio show, and then all of a sudden the energy changes. But Ken is very important to me because my first husband worked at NASA, and I have various levels and dimensions, and so I consider myself a time traveler in some realms as interdimensional. But I want to get where I can speak to people depending on where they come into our group. So I'm forming this Allied Command on the planet because we have an Allied Command that's real on the planet, with the one for the whole entire globe inside the government, inside the military, and we have one off planet. And so I want to bring them together, which hasn't been done in reality, although we talk about secret space and solar warden, and Ken and I was brought together for a purpose. But we have the NASA. You mentioned NASA, and he's about NASA, and I was at NASA, and I grew up down there as a teenager, went to high school down there. And so what I'm trying to do is get all this energy together, and it's very multi-dimensional in various levels. So Janet is one level, I'm a level, you're a level, and Ken's a level, but we all need to decide how we can speak this on YouTube, which this will be on YouTube, and Stitcher and iTunes and Spreaker, but have people understand we're not totally out of the norm, that we are really the normal, but there's just a lot of people that never in the past really talked about all this except in certain groups. So if you can help me out with Ken, and because Ken, we were just talking about his book, but he did his through past life regression. So we got to find a way to, Janet, you know what I'm talking about, the different levels, whether they've been regressed, remembered, time travelers, or whatever. So any help, and I'm going to put me on mute, but if you can help Ken understand and me understand, because I've been off planet and that sounds nuts. So I've been near death, out of body, and worked in and under the ground and on top of the ground. But I haven't really. I've been writing for years and years, books and UFO Digest. But more or less, people say, yeah, but they're fiction. So I haven't come out with just talking to people on a reality basis, except on this radio show. So Janet's bringing forth people saying, no, this is our reality in consciousness. So we're all looking for ways to talk. And MUFON, which we had on last night, they're bringing in a new experiencer level with Kathy Martin and Betty and Barney Hill level. So Janet, Ken, and I are bringing in the Allied Command level, where we're actually saying, no, we're not necessarily this group or that group or in this galaxy or that galaxy. We're allied. We're all of the above, not just the Corey Goods and the David Wilcox and the Emery Smiths. So I hope that helps you out. But I'm going to go on mute, and then Janet, you and Ken establish how we're going to do this Allied Command thing, you know, because we're all met for a reason. All right, I'm going to hush now. So the ACO is what I go by.
Okay, you hush. Okay, so the question that comes to mind is, so one thing we all have in common is that we're conscious contactees. And so let's go back to Ken.
Okay.
Is it true that you've met extraterrestrials? And if so, in what capacity, and what do you recall consciously, especially now that you have activated your memories through regression?
Well, actually, it goes all the way back to when I was in the, I guess it was the second grade, about 46, 45, a place in there. At any rate, in which my mother had married T.C. Ray, and we lived in a little town, little farm outside of a little town called Hart, H-A-R-T, Texas. Only 560 people, and that included all the farmers in the area. And there was a tremendous rainstorm. This was just before October, so in the last part of September, the beginning of school, we had this tremendous rain, and a neighbor called T.C., Ray's stepdad, and said, man, did you guys see the lightning bolt that just hit right outside from where? And they lived about a mile and a half away. We were really out in the country in those days. any rate, no, that we didn't. But my older brother, Dr. A.R. Johnston, and then the middle brother, James Charles Jimmy, we all said, oh, well, we'll go out and see because it supposedly hit right out in front of our little farmhouse. And so we put on our rubber boots and ran across the mud road and the fence. And, AR is going to be sophisticated because he's 5 years older than me. He's going to be, and Jimmy, he sort of didn't care too much, but I was a little, so I had to outrun everybody. And I ran out, and there's this big old flattened down area of maize that had been smashed down and probably about a half a football field wide. And I'm standing there looking at it, and AR and Jimmy haven't gotten there yet. And on the other side of the circle is this big bird, which really was a whooping crane. And it looked at me, and then it turned its head forward, took about 3 or 4 steps, flapped its wings, went up, and then went zap, disappeared. Well, that kind of, then when AR and Jimmy got there, I asked them, did you see the bird? No, we didn't see anything. So that kind of stuck with me most of my life. And there was a couple of other events that took part when I was young growing up where I'm now able to go back and see that actually I was, how do you call it, abducted, and I had a chance to meet some of the extraterrestrials. And so this was important to try to bring this out. I mentioned it. And then I think the discussion at the deal that Sasha and Janet was saying, well, Sasha, he's a professional hypnotist and excellent at regression. And that's where we met and went into digging back. So I guess I become called a contactee. And one of the main things that I wound up doing that I'm trying to get more information on is that I wound up meeting so many of the people that are now with us on Mars, where I was kind of a little hopper pilot. Call it the hopper because the Mars atmosphere, you pop up and then you translate down and then you let down and land. And help me out here, Janet. Our friend that just had his eye operation. Now,
Andrew DiBishago.
Thank you so much. If you hear me get locked up, that's because of the auto accident I was in, and I had a little bit of blockage in the front lobe of the brain, and so I'll be going along, and all of a sudden I'll drop out, and so you can hit the keyword, and I'll just go right back into where I was. But yeah, so that's where I met him. First of all, was on Mars, but then we met together in that big conference. We all got together, and that's where we all met. I'm trying to be. It wasn't Allied Command. Can't remember what the name of the group was, where TJ and all of us met. But it's interesting how we've all had these experiences, and we've kept them quiet most of our lives, and then now we're all being brought back together. And I see it as that is the sign that we are now moving into the time of full disclosure, so that the truth is getting out there, because the government's tried to hide it. Go ahead. What?
I agree. Yeah. So let's pass to Crysana. So, what do you remember going back to your childhood with your first contact, and what was going on?
I think my first memory of a craft, because I was having conversations with them at night for a long time, but the first time I saw a craft was when I was 7. And I was walking home from school, and there was a circular craft on 3 legs in the woods, and I knew they were there, and I had an interaction with them. And, of course, when I got home, my mother wanted to know where the heck I'd been, because I was 7, so I was in the 2nd grade. And I did not need anyone to tell me that the less I told my mother, the better things would be for me.
Same for me. Same story.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
So I didn't talk it up, because I just didn't want my mother coming unglued. But that is my earliest memory of knowing that these had to be highly organized people. They knew what they were doing. They had technology, and for some reason, they wanted to examine me.
Right.
That's it.
Interesting Janet, the same thing. Same as second grade. My brother Jimmy and I were